Welcome to the Love with Francesca podcast, where we deep dive into relationships, self-love, and the empowering journey to authentic connection and healing. I'm actually recording this on January 2nd. Although I wanted to release this earlier, I thought, you know what? Let me actually live the New Year's and experience it, and then speak from a place of authenticity and be real about what my New Year's reflections were, and then what it feels like to go through this like New Year's period, right? I'll get started sharing kind of where I'm at, what I've been going through this year, all the amazing things, some of the challenges. And then I'm going to leave you with some recommendations of how to do your New Year's reflecting in case you haven't done it already. Because sometimes we just feel all this pressure to do it immediately on like December 31st, have to like sit down and do all these reflections. And sometimes that's just not true. Like maybe you're busy with work, maybe you've been busy with family visiting, or you're visiting family, or you just got back from visiting family and you're like, the last thing I want to do is sit down and journal. So that's fine. It doesn't have to happen on December 31st. It can happen on January 15th. I don't know, whenever you want it to happen. You can reflect whenever you want on whatever you want. So I'm just going to put that as a disclaimer. That's kind of like the mood for today, because that's kind of where I'm at. So we're just trying to keep it honest. So, what I want to share with you is that this year was incredible when it came to my relationships and challenging as well, because what relationships aren't challenging, but challenging in terms of this business, just kind of getting connected to my mission and why I'm doing this and figuring out how to do this. But it did end up really well because this beautiful podcast came out of it. So, relationships wise, I think some of you might know I got engaged. So, that was really exciting. And that was just like a dream come true. And mostly just being able to deepen the relationships that I already had, whether it was through dealing with conflict that came up, whether it was choosing to be vulnerable with new people in my life that I hadn't been vulnerable with, whether it was I actually ended a few relationships this year, which was challenging for me as a recovering people pleaser. um, closing closing relationships without just like avoiding the whole situation and like really facing it head on and talking to the person and letting them know like my reasons and why it is that I chose to do that isn't always easy, let's say. So I'm feeling pretty good about some of the steps that I took in terms of like getting out of my comfort zone, but mostly being able to implement a lot of the things that I teach and preach to my clients, being able to implement them, but in a way that feels authentic to me. I say that because, boundaries and being vulnerable and doing all these things, all this like healthy communication and healthy relationship stuff, it can be extremely challenging when it comes to finding that balance between like being honest but being kind. Sometimes our honesty, if it's not filtered properly, it can just come out a bit harshly, or it's very focused on us and how we're feeling. And we may not be taking into consideration how the other person may actually be receiving what we're telling them or what it is that we need to share with them. So just learning how to like do that in a way that feels respectful. Like I used to kind of just anxiously like type a message or call someone up and say something and just like deliver the message and be like, "Ugh," like, okay, I'm done. Whereas now I kind of encourage myself to obviously like consult with a few people if I needed to, like to get some advice. But it was like, let me write down what it is that I want to say to this person. Let me read it over a few times. Let me maybe send it to someone who's like a trusted person that I know I can share this with and will give me like some really good feedback on it, like some good constructive feedback. And then let me like sleep on it and then decide to deliver it. Sometimes we kind of act on this like you get that impulse to finally do the thing that you've been scared of doing, You're like, okay, I'm ready, I'll do it. And that's a really great thing. And sometimes at the beginning, I think of working on ourselves, it is useful to act on that impulse like immediately, because then maybe if you wait too long, you'll overthink it, and then you'll just decide to just like avoid the situation and not deal with it. So it is really useful, but I'll say and at the same time, being able to take the time to reflect and really consider my use of language and my use of wording and making sure that the message that I want to send is going to come through clearly as it can, right? Because I can't control the other person's interpretation. But I think that's pretty important. And then also just, you know, taking the time to do that so that you can really value and honor like what it is that you need, what it is that you're trying to get out of this, being respectful of where you're at and what it is that you want. And that's a pretty challenging thing to do, I think, for anybody, especially if you're listening to this, you probably fall into this category, but women that have felt like power has kind of been taken away from them, they've been kind of silenced, they've been told that what they want and what they desire just really isn't that important and that their needs or just who they are really isn't that important. So that can be a pretty challenging thing to do. I think overall, I'm feeling really proud of being able to do that and being able to be honest with people, even when it's hard, and share truth with them that maybe they don't want to hear. And then just kind of giving them the time and space to receive that and sit with that. And not trying to control their reaction, but also not trying to control the way in which they perceive me, like really letting that go and having the confidence to know that the way that I feel is valid and what I'm asking for is reasonable and valid. And that's been a really challenging thing to do. So I was feeling pretty bad about that. Also, because when we do set boundaries with people, whether it's like just gently detaching or whether it's like fully just letting them go, we're actually creating a lot of space in our lives. Like, if you have anyone in your life that in some sort of way is limiting you from growth or limiting you from feeling joyful or being able to express yourself or being able to be authentic, or like they bring out a side of you that's just not who you're trying to be. And so you're realizing that you kind of need to detach from them. When you do decide to do that, practice detachment with love, and we can get into that another day. But when you actually decide to practice that, what you're also doing is energetically creating space for yourself to welcome in new energy, new people. And it doesn't mean that you always, like I said, you don't always have to just, kick people out of your life. It doesn't have to be so drastic, but even just putting a little bit of distance between you and them, you're creating a space that then can just naturally be filled by someone else with, higher like you're kind of sending a message to the universe and to people around you that you have a higher standard for yourself. And so automatically those new people that are going to come into your life are going to match that higher standard that you're creating. So it's a really valuable thing. It's really challenging. There's a lot of grief that goes into it. There's a lot of self-doubt that goes into it. We can feel like we're being unreasonable, or, we should just try and make it work, or we should just try and fix it. And obviously, depending on the situation, that might be true. But I really think that being able to take the time to listen to yourself and honor what it is that you're needing allows you to create space to be able to receive something new in your life. And that's pretty magical. So that's kind of what I have to share about relationships. I'm going to share a little bit about the behind the scenes of this business, which have been super, super challenging. But I want to share this because I kind of got more clear about what it is that I want to do and who it is that I want to help. And what's been really interesting is that part of figuring that out has also very much matched like my natural evolution of what I'm working on in my personal life and my relationship with myself. And so a lot of this year, terms of the behind the scenes of this business and figuring out like what kind of program do I launch? How do I launch that program? Whose strategy do I follow? Because you might not be in the coaching world, so this may not make sense to you, but there's a lot of support out there. There's a lot of people that want to help you grow your online coaching business, which is wonderful. The thing is, they all kind of have their different strategies of what they think is best. And what I learned this year is that when you don't have enough trust in yourself and you're not listening enough to yourself and what it is that you want, I'll speak from experience, like you're just going to end up following what someone else thinks is the best way and then kind of like forcing that on yourself. And that just doesn't work so well, especially if you're trying to create something that's organic, sustainable, that you're going to be able to follow through long term. And so what I realized is that by not trusting myself, I was giving away I was giving away my power to other people to let them decide how I should run this business. Meanwhile, this business came from me. It came from my own ideas. It came from my own desire to create what I wish I would have had when I was going through a lot of the challenges that I speak on. And so it almost kind of doesn't make sense to like outsource that from someone else, right? And so I did a lot of work, not just in actually implementing a new program, testing out different things, but behind the scenes, I did a lot of inner work on learning how to trust myself, learning how to believe that I'm capable of creating something that's going to be useful and helpful for someone, something that matters. And that's a really challenging thing because I'm still learning how to articulate this, so bear with me. But a lot of it has to do with like my own inner personal challenges, right? And it's interesting how work kind of parallels that in a way. And so what's been really cool, what I've been like truly, truly so excited about is this podcast. Realized right when I was launching it that I've been joking about making a podcast for the past like 5 years, like ever since I started really listening to them. And with like all of my close friends, I was like, what if we start a podcast? What if we do a podcast? What if whatever. And then it just kind of hit me when I was starting my business about a year and a half ago. I was like, I would love to have a podcast. Like, I would love to interview people and get to talk about things that are important to me and share them with others and create, accessible content for people to be able to consume. Because I know I've benefited so much from podcasts and conversations about topics like these. So I was like, I would love to, be able to create that. And then again, like I kind of outsourced that trust. And so that I was following and letting them guide me, I wasn't really letting them guide me. I was just like doing whatever they said was good. And it really wasn't working for me. When I first launched my business, it didn't result in what I wanted to result in. And I'm so happy that it didn't because that wasn't my style. And so throughout the year, when I've been able to learn how to trust myself, what came out of it was like, I really want to launch a podcast. Like, this is truly, truly what I want to do. I love talking to other people. I love having conversations. I get super, super inspired after, listening to the women that I've already interviewed, and you'll be hearing from them so soon. So it was like, just do it, just go ahead and do it imperfectly. So a lot of 2024 was learning how to do things imperfectly, which is a struggle for a perfectionist like myself, to be honest with you. And also just learning how to trust myself, like learning how to believe that, I may not know right now exactly how to do the thing that I want to do, but little by little I will figure it out. And, giving myself the space and grace to be able to make mistakes and being able to listen to those mistakes, pay attention to them, pay attention to the feedback, and be able to integrate that with a lot of self-compassion without beating myself up or feeling horrible or like losing hope and faith in my dream or anything like that. So that was, on a personal note, that was a significant lot of work went on behind the scenes in order to be here and be able to talk to you today. So that was pretty exciting. The thing about this work that I love so much is that I learned so much from the clients that I work with. I learned so much from my own personal work, and it's just a beautiful, like, the more that I grow, the more that I get to share that with the people that I'm working with, not necessarily like my own personal stories or growth, but the lessons that I've learned, I get to share that with people and I get to kind of help them along the way in whatever it is that they're going through. The other beautiful thing, I won't get into detail because I want to reserve their privacy, but my gosh, like if I just think about the clients that I'm working with and I've been working with this past year, like the growth that I have seen in all of the people that I've worked with and seen like women break up with their partners and how hard that was and go through the grief and then learn to like love and respect themselves throughout that process and either get back with that person and learn how to communicate their needs with that person or decide like, you know what, like I'm just going to go off on my own. I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to take the time to work on myself in order to attract the right person for me, or whether it's people still in their long-term relationships, learning how to communicate in a healthier way, learning how to set boundaries, become confident in themselves. I've been lucky. I mean, I love that I get to work with so many mothers, and it's just beautiful to see how there's such like mama tiger with their children, and sometimes with themselves, they kind of aren't always able to do that. So it's really beautiful to be able to see like how like through the work that we do together, how they are able to become so empowered that they believe in themselves, they believe in their ideas and their parenting styles, and obviously always open to like collaborate and negotiate and learn, but just feel so much more confident in themselves and be able to also create like their own space for themselves in their lives, not feel as guilty that they're not like available for everyone, or be able to stand up to their partners and advocate for themselves. It's if that's the case, leave toxic relationships if that's the case. Like it's just been, I don't know, like I always say like I don't know what other job I would do if I didn't have this wasn't my job, because there's really nothing else that I enjoy, and this just gives me such immense satisfaction, and it's just really, really beautiful to see that. So I just kind of wanted to share that with you to, if that calls to you or inspires you, whether it's to decide like, hey, let me check out what it would be like to work with Francesca, or even go, work with someone local in your neighborhood, sign up for support, because there's some things that we just don't know how to do ourselves, and there's absolutely no shame in asking for help. I understand how challenging it is and how embarrassing and uncomfortable it can feel to sit with someone and share your like intimate life details with them, but getting the help of a professional in order to reach those goals that you want to reach, especially like in your personal life, we don't have to go through that stuff on our own. That's kind of like all about me, and some of the beautiful things that have been happening and some of the challenging things that have been happening as well. I want to encourage you, when you're thinking about the past year, I want you to, for a second, just take inventory. So what that means is, with a lot of compassion, with a lot of kindness, a lot of grace, just sit down, just grab a piece of paper, or go on your computer, whatever you prefer, and just start to write down like, what went well this year? What do I like about what I was able to do this year? What beautiful things happened in my life this year? And then what are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that I did that I don't love that I did them, right? So maybe I acted in a way that hurt someone or upset someone, or I acted in a way that was disrespectful to myself. And so that didn't feel good. I kind of betrayed my own needs and sense of integrity. Or maybe you noticed ways in which you're sabotaging. So just write it down, just look at it, just no judgment, no guilt, nothing. Like it already happened. There's nothing we can do about it. There's no need to feel guilty about it or anything like that. But just really being able to take a second to look at that, because that's really going to inform, because we're going to get into it in the next episode, but that's really going to help you create the goals for 2025 in a way that's realistic, in a way that's compassionate to you, and just kind of like respectful and not like ridiculously, you know what I'm talking about. The perfect, goals that none of us can ever reach. Anyway, so here's some topics that I think might be helpful, starting with your relationships. So maybe thinking about, how did some of your relationships evolve? Let's start with like, did your relationships evolve, right? Did you create new relationships? Did you end relationships? Did you deepen the relationships that you have with people? Did you stand up for yourself in any sort of way? Did you share any vulnerabilities with anyone, right? Did you develop trust with people? Thinking about boundaries. Did you set boundaries? Maybe you just learned what boundaries are. Amazing. That's a great first start. Now, are you setting the boundaries? How are you setting the boundaries? How do you feel after you're setting the boundaries? And I'm asking you a lot of questions, but just to kind of get like your mind thinking and reflecting. So that's kind of like the external relationships, right? Your relationships with other people. Now, if we were to think about your relationships with yourself, I shared a little bit about building self-trust, building self-love. So I kind of want to encourage you to think about that too. Like, did you do anything to build self-trust? Like maybe you said you were going to start something and you actually started it. Maybe you created some sort of consistent routine in your life, whether it's something related to self-care or just showing up for yourself, whether it's like physical exercise or personal hygiene, anything like that, right? I also want to encourage you to think about whether or not you were able to prioritize your well-being. Again, you don't need to be so hard on yourself. Like, we're not saying, like, did you become like the marathon athlete that you wanted to become, even though you've never run before? We're not saying that. We're just saying, like, you know, what are some of, just focus on the positives for a second. Like, what are just some of the ways in which you were able to create positive well-being? Maybe you just simply drank more water this year. Maybe in the morning, instead of only drinking coffee, you also added a banana to your breakfast. Like, whatever it is, right? I want you to just for a minute, literally only try and find even the tiny, smallest things that you were able to do for yourself. And if you're like, no, Francesca, I'm good. This year went amazing. Everything was amazing. What beautiful, wonderful. Like, this is probably easier for you to do then. Part. The reason I wanted to start by focusing on relationships, other than the fact that obviously this is a relationship podcast, but I also wanted to talk about relationships because I find that often New Year's goals are very like achievement oriented. What did you do? Like work, success, career-wise, things like that. So I was like, let's just put that to the side for a second so that we can just reflect on like the internal part of our lives, right? The relationship between you and you. How did that go this year? Did it improve? What I want to leave you with is, I know I've said this already, but I'm just going to repeat it again because maybe you're like the women that I work with, but the women that I work with are pretty hard on themselves and pretty perfectionistic and have a really hard time really like sitting down and recognizing the progress that they made, celebrating that progress, and really, really like valuing what it is that they were able to do. So, just for repetition's sake, just to make sure that it really sinks in, I really want you to be super kind and compassionate with yourself as you create this list, as you reflect on this. This is not the time to start writing down everything that you weren't able to do and berate yourself for that. Once you do finish that list, if you want to send it to me, I would love to see it. I would love to celebrate you. I want to encourage you to celebrate yourself. And that celebration can be as big or small as you want it to be. Whether you're like, you know what? This week I'm going to buy myself flowers from the grocery store. Amazing. This week I'm going to go treat myself to my favorite like caramel macchiato, whatever. Amazing. Or you're like, no, I'm going to book like a full spa day for myself because 2024 was hard. I went through it and here I am on the other side and I'm so proud of myself. Beautiful. Like, do whatever it is that feels good to you, but please take a second to celebrate yourself. We don't typically live in families or environments where we're constantly reminded on a daily basis how wonderful and amazing and valuable we are. So if this episode helps you remember that, amazing. And maybe even if you can help yourself remember that, I think that would be even more powerful when it comes to your relationship with yourself. With that being said, I'm gonna stop here. I feel like I've shared a lot of potential things that you can think about. So I'm going to give you some time to think about them. And if you, like I said, want to share any of your reflections or any of your celebrations with me, I would love to hear from you. You can just email me or find me on Instagram and DM me. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. As always, if you enjoyed this episode and it helped you in any sort of way, it would really help me if you could please like, subscribe, follow, share this episode with a friend. Another episode will be coming out. So when you hear this, 2 episodes will be available, and I will see you next week.